Hello and welcome to Living History. I'm Carl Jere, and I thank you for coming today. Today our special guest is Jere Robings. Thank you for coming, Jere, and being part of Living History.
Thank you for inviting me, Carl.
It's a real pleasure. I wanted to talk to you about your life and times and what you've been doing here in the Conejo Valley. Could you tell me when you first came to the Conejo Valley?
Well, my first drive through the Conejo Valley was probably 1952. I had just been drafted into the Army during the Korean War and was stationed in San Luis Obispo and living in Hollywood. So I drove every weekend from Hollywood to San Luis Obispo and back. And in those days, the Conejo Valley was just wide open spaces, no freeways. The main road through town was Ventura Boulevard. So it was quite a different area at that time.
Right, mainly pasture land.
That's right.
That's right. And this was, your activity was with the Army.
I was in the Army. Also, at about that same time, early 1950s, before and after the Army, I read meters for the Edison Company and read meters in Agoura, Calabasas, and the Malibu Mountains. And again, it was just a lot of open space and very few homes.
Well, that was about a 40-year time period there. Did you have a sense that this was an area that was going to grow and prosper and kind of turn into what it is today?
We always said, driving up and down the highway, that one day this is going to be all houses. It's going to be all developed, and it was pretty clear that that would be in the future.
So during that time span, you've kind of seen the Conejo Valley grow and change. What for you was the most significant growth change that took place over these years?
Well, in the early 1960s, the Edison Company put me into a job where I worked with the developers and bringing in the electrical service and talking about what type of electrical needs would be in the homes. And we were promoting all electric homes in those days and what we called medallion homes. So I had the opportunity to work with tract developers in Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, Camarillo, Ventura, Oxnard, and throughout the entire county. And it was just an explosive growth. Orchards were being ripped out and 300 homes at a time were being constructed all over. So it was quite exciting.
Yeah, during those particular days,
yes,
a lot of growth. Is there one thing that kind of stands out in your memory having to do with the Conejo Valley? Something you saw developing or going on?
Oh, I guess one of the things that was the highlight was when Olson Road was made a connecting road to Simi Valley, because prior to that time, the only way to get from Thousand Oaks to Simi Valley was down Moore Park Road and the Norwegian Grade out to Tierra Rojada Road.
The long way.
It was a long, slow road, yeah. And so when Olson Road was cut through, that was quite a big move, yeah.
It certainly helped you get around. When did you first come to Thousand Oaks?
Well, the Edison Company transferred me from the Santa Monica office to Oxnard in 1962, and I stayed there until 1972. At that time, I was made manager of our office in Simi Valley, so I bought a home in Thousand Oaks, and the district office, the main office, was in Thousand Oaks, so I was running back and forth between Thousand Oaks and Simi. But yeah, that was 1972. I'm in the same home.
Right, almost done with your mortgage.
Yeah.
Were you involved at all in the community in terms of what was going on, or did you have recollections of early
Sure.
politics?
Gosh, I was involved with city government, city staff, county people, with regard to Edison's interface with the public entities, whether if it had to do with a road widening and the electric poles, power poles had to be relocated, I'd be involved in that, or the undergrounding of utilities, just all nature of things. So I had a lot of dealing with city and county government people, And on the public relations side, I was involved in, served on the board of directors of the Simi Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Moore Park Chamber of Commerce, the Boy Scouts, the YMCA. I was on the board of the American Heart Association of Ventura County for about 16 years. So there was a lot of different types of community service involved.
You mentioned the undergrounding of utilities. I know a lot of community members don't recognize that that has actually been a significant change here in Thousand Oaks, especially along Thousand Oaks Boulevard.
Exactly.
That it's almost unnoticed, but if you think about it as you drive down that boulevard and look up, the poles are gone. And certainly for, I'd say, former city manager Grant Brimhall, that was a major achievement.
It was a big, big move. The Edison Company, under the direction of the Public Utilities Commission, actually set aside money for every city to spend for the undergrounding of utilities. But it's a very expensive project. And we're going to have another project here in Thousand Oaks soon on Moore Park Road.
That's right.
And so we'll be seeing some more lines coming down. And it does add to the beauty of the city. There's
Absolutely.
no question about it.
It changes the whole complexion of the surrounding area.
We used to hear people right after the undergrounding had taken place. They would drive down Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and they said, "There's something different. Can't put my finger on it, but there's something different about this boulevard." And they weren't aware of the fact that the utility poles and overhead lines had come down.
If you had to describe Thousand Oaks to someone who hadn't been here before, how would you describe it? What would you tell them briefly about Thousand Oaks as a community?
I've described it to people, family on the East Coast, as one of the most beautiful communities I could find. Ideal weather, nice community, good city government, wonderful people, good neighbors. It's got everything. I've just couldn't say enough good things about Thousand Oaks as a place to live.
Absolutely. If you had to pick one person that you think had the biggest impact on the development of Thousand Oaks as the vibrant community that it's really become, who would you pick and why?
Oh, I think we'd have to go back to the Jans family, who had the original concept for the development and planning, master planning of this city. And I say that because at the same time, Simi Valley was being developed, not with the coordinated master plan concept. The developers were coming into Simi Valley, and this goes back to the early 1960s before it incorporated, and all of the planning was handled through the county offices in Ventura. And I always had the feeling that the planners in Ventura either weren't astute enough to understand what was happening in Simi Valley, or they didn't care, but it seemed to be more of a haphazard planning. Not to put Simi Valley down in a negative way, but they did things that most cities wouldn't do. They built houses contiguous to the railroad right-of-way, and every time the trains come through town, those houses certainly feel the effects. So Thousand Oaks has been well planned, well developed, and as I say, the city management from Glenn Kendall, Grant Brimhall, and now Mary Jean Laz, they do a wonderful job.
What has been your greatest personal achievement?
Well, I guess moving up through the ranks of the Edison Company from 1950 until I retired in 1988, 38-year career. I had a lot of opportunity to be involved in the public affairs, the political aspects, the public relations side, and just the involvement in the community. When I retired from the Edison Company, I went to the staff of our Congressman, Elton Gallagly, and working on the congressional staff was an interesting experience. Being on the phone daily with the offices in Washington, being involved in the national affairs was quite interesting.
Yeah, what part of the politics was most enjoyable for you?
Well, when I had that job, I served as the congressman's field representative, and it was impossible for him to attend all of the functions here in the district while he was back in Washington. So I would go to a lot of community events. Every Chamber of Commerce has an installation night. We would be there to provide recognition to the outgoing presidents of the chambers. And the district at that time, the congressional district, was gerrymandered in such a way that I covered areas from Ojai and Port Hueneme through Ventura County to Northridge, Sunland, Tujunga, and Valencia. So it was a long, circuitous route to get from one end of the district to the other. But had the opportunity to meet with a lot of political people and people that I otherwise would never have come in contact with.
No political aspirations of your own to hold office?
Well, after some years, I did run for county supervisor and lost that race, and then a couple of years ago ran for state assembly and lost that race.
And see anything out into the future?
No,
continue?
no future aspirations, not at this stage of my life.
Now, you are also heavily involved in the operation of a significant nonprofit corporation. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I spent 10 years working for two nonprofit taxpayers associations. The first was the Ventura County Taxpayers Association, and I left the congressional staff to go to work for them, overseeing looking at budgets and policies of the county and the 10 cities within the county, a lot of the other school districts, parks districts, harbor districts, that type of thing. And that was really an interesting aspect of my life. I had opportunity to make some significant changes in some of those areas.
Just give me a brief example of one of those.
Well, in early 1989, actually, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors had adopted a new employee benefits plan. And when they presented it to the Board of Supervisors before the board, and this was the county staff, it was a pretty sketchy outline of what they were doing. And I went to the county personnel office and got a copy of the employee benefits plan. And when I saw what they had given to the elected officials and the department heads, it was astounding, because the county supervisors had very quietly doubled their income without telling the public what they were doing. And they did it with these little benefits and perks. They gave themselves 7 weeks extra pay once a year. So they got paid for 59 weeks instead of 52 for no reason other than that increased their salary, and they didn't have to go before the public and say that they were giving themselves a pay raise. The county was very reluctant to share information with us at that time. I asked for the dollar figures that went along with all of these benefits, and they refused to disclose that. They said it was confidential. Well, it wasn't. It was public record. But the county auditor refused it. The county council refused to give it to me. The county CAO refused to give it to me. So after 3 years of beating my head against a wall with the county, I gave all of the information, a large folder that I had, to a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. And the Los Angeles Times then asked the county for the same information, and they were refused. Well, then it was the law department of the Los Angeles Times that contacted the county, and they were forced then to open their books, and that's when we found out what was involved. That led to some changes in the whole benefit program, and we got rid of a lot of those hidden perks and benefits.
Do you think things have changed since then, or are there still these difficulties?
There's still difficulties. There are some governmental agencies that refuse to follow the Public Records Act, which is a California law. I have gone into public agencies and had an executive director of an agency just say, no, you can't see our books. You can't see those records, which then leads me to go to the district attorney or the grand jury. I've had numerous meetings with the grand jury on different issues relating to public agencies throughout the county.
Well, how do you think the city of Thousand Oaks stacks up, although I'm biased on this particular?
Well, I'm biased too, and I currently serve on the city's budget task force.
Tell me a bit about that. What's it like serving? And
Well,
working at
the budget task force is made up of 15 members. Each council member appoints 3 to the budget task force. And then it's staffed by the city manager, assistant city managers, city treasurer. And we spent 1 year, a year ago, establishing minimum standards for each city department. And when I talk of minimum standards, that might pertain to public works as to how often a street would be resurfaced, how often water lines would be checked, how often or how many times a telephone should ring before a clerk would pick it up. And it got into some real minutia as to the city operation. But we had the opportunity to hear presentations by every department head within the city. And even though they're not part of the city, but the sheriff's department and the fire department came in and met with us. And of course, they're under contract with this city. But it was a very enlightening session. And as I say, it took a year to complete the work. And what the end result of that will be that department heads can meet with their staff and tell them precisely what's expected. If you work in the water department of the Public Works, here's what we expect from this department. So it was a worthwhile effort. And with the 15-member board, you get a real mix of interests. And some people come in with their own agendas, see things that they want done. But I was only disappointed in the fact that we don't really delve into the city budget and look at that under a microscope as much as I think they should.
What do you think the biggest challenge for Thousand Oaks as a community is going out into the future?
Well, I think that there's such a rift, a division amongst the citizens of the city. Some who feel that the city is a beautiful place, idyllic, and feel that everything is going in the right direction. We have others who feel that it's going in the wrong direction. We have to stop everything, correct things. I don't know. It just seems that it's going to be difficult after several years of people coming and battling at city council meetings to ever get this resolved. And I think it's unfortunate. This issue of growth and no growth, I don't think is a legitimate issue. Growth is going to occur. I did a study a few years ago for the county-wide population, and the births of this county exceeded deaths by about 7,000 a year. Well, you're increasing the population by 7,000 people a year. In 10 years, you've got a 70,000 population gain, and they have to live somewhere. Yeah, I don't think it's right to expect our children to have to move out of town or relocate because there's no housing available.
What would be your biggest hope for the future then for Thousand Oaks?
Well, I would like to see it continue as it has. I think we have such an outstanding mix of commercial and industrial and residential development that it really looks good for the future. We have good sales tax revenues that provide the services in the city. We have excellent administrators. So I'm very positive about the future of Thousand Oaks.
What are you planning to do? What would be your 10-year plan for yourself?
Well, at this stage of my life, I'm now fully retired, although I do a little consulting on the side. But my wife and I have talked of selling our home and relocating, but we always come back to the same question: where could we find any place better than where we are? We have a home that's contiguous to the Joel McCrae Ranch on the north end of the city. And it's open space, it's quiet, safe, clean. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about it.
That's actually quite a testament that you've lived here this long and
stayed in the same
that's right.
same place.
You're planning to stay out into the future. Is there any question I haven't asked you? Is there anything about your history that we haven't touched on?
Oh, I think some of the other things that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about was the involvement with the service club, the Rotary clubs. Having belonged to the Rotary Club of Simi Valley and then in Ventura when I had an office up there, and now as a member of the Thousand Oaks Rotary Club, that's been a highlight of my life, being involved in that type of thing. When I go back to Hollywood, where I grew up, and I see the conditions in those neighborhoods, I always give thanks that I was able to raise my children here and in the Conejo school system and in the youth activities of the Conejo Valley. So it's just been a positive experience from the very beginning.
Outstanding. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jere, having you today as our guest on Living History. I hope all things in the future go well for you. And
thank you, Carl.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Bye.